The first thing with Pesach that we want to discuss really is the preparation of the home, right? In general, how we prepare our home. Let me close the door. So the way we prepare our home, the mitzvah really is that we're supposed to not have chametz in our home. We're not supposed to own chametz. We're not supposed to have chametz in a place that we might eat it, or that we're going to come across it, that it would be ours to see. So therefore, it becomes a mitzvah to clean the home, to actually check out through the entire home, even parts of your home that you would never be eating in, in order to find where chametz or any type of thing like chametz might be found. You could even go so far. We check our garage, we check our basement, places that you might never think that you should check, we do. And the idea is that it's not just that we're actually doing a pragmatic search for items, which would be in most cases what we're doing. In this case, we're also doing a religious obligation of a search which is symbolic of a search for character traits within ourselves that are not good. So just as we're physically looking through our house to make sure that things are gone through, that we don't find chametz, so too we search within the deeper recesses within our soul and within our heart to try to find traits that perhaps are things that we should work on. And it's symbolic of that, which is what the freedom of Pesach stands for. We're free from the addictions, from the ruts, from the depression. I don't mean medical depression, but sort of environmental depression. These types of things that people come across, our inability to do something, or we're feeling that we're afraid to do something. These ideas, right, are things that we search for within ourselves. And on Pesach, we're given an extra push spiritually to be able to help us. So we prepare by looking for that before Pesach. But literally, we do it by looking for chametz. So so we will go through all types of places. Like, for instance, sometimes you will find chametz in places you don't expect you'll find it in. Like, for instance, I know a fellow, instead of wearing a regular kittel, like a kittel is the white coat that we wear on Yom Kippur, and many men wear on Yom Kippur, and they wear also at the Seder. Now, a kittel itself doesn't have pockets, because it's really a death shroud. That's where it comes from. But there are people who have ones that have different uses, and they're like fancy, and they'll have a pocket. And I know of a case where a fellow, right, he had put a cookie in his pocket after Yom Kippur because he was hungry, and he grabbed the cookie to eat, and then he had to leave. He's put it in his pocket, and it sat in there for 6 months because he hadn't worn the kittel since that time, and therefore it stayed inside. And then here he is sitting at the Seder. Right, and at the Seder, he suddenly finds that he's got this chametz in his pocket, right, where he didn't before. So you never know where you might find chametz, and a person should take the time to look. It doesn't mean that you have to be crazy, that you have to take apart walls and things. Like do you actually have to go underneath your refrigerator? Right, like I know in my house, we've always pulled the refrigerator out and cleaned underneath it. Like, you're not going to eat anything that's under there, right? In fact, if you didn't pull it out before Pesach, you probably never would pull it out. So there's not much chance that anything's going to come into contact with you, right? There's the papers right there if you want. But nevertheless, we do that. We are not confusing Pesach cleaning with spring cleaning. Now, there are two different things. Pesach cleaning is specifically cleaning for the sake of trying to get rid of chametz. So you want to do more than that, that's fine, that's up to you. But that's all that we really have to do. So we have all types of places that we look throughout our home, and we're going to go through some of the examples that are more common. But it can be in your garage. People clean their car. You're going to see all over the place people advertising car cleaning services. Because especially if you have children, or if you commute, you are going to find crumbs and food within your car. So we clean that out. Even though in many of these cases, according to the letter of the law, you're never going to come into contact with these things. Like, you're not going to pull your stove out and grab food underneath your stove and eat it on Pesach. It's just you're not going to do it. But nevertheless, because of this alternative reason of the spiritual aspect behind it, we go a bit further than one might normally go. So let's look at some of the things. So as I said, the general rules. But the second thing to keep in mind, especially if you have children or grandchildren or children visiting, children walk around with food. And children do not necessarily think about where they leave the food. And, it's very common to lift up the pillows of your couch and find cookies and find potato chips, and to anywhere that a child is going to go, you're going to find food. Sometimes that food is going to be obvious, like on their high chair or in their crib. Right, and we clean those places for Pesach as well because of it. Of course, if you don't have children who come into the house, then you don't have to be concerned about some of those things. Right? You're not going to find it as common that an adult is going to do some of the things a child might do. But an adult would very easily be eating potato chips on the couch while they're watching television or reading a book, and it can fall. So we go through all types of areas for that reason. Yes?
Can you get somebody to come clean your house for Passover?
Sure. I don't know who, but you could.
I know someone you can contact.
Okay. So now let's look at some of the most common places where a lot of the questions come up. We'll start with the kitchen. The kitchen is, of course, where you're going to be preparing for Pesach, and you're going to be using on Pesach. And if you're fortunate and you have a Passover kitchen, that makes it a bit easier. But let's presume you don't. And you're going to have to go through the process of preparing all of your objects in the kitchen for Pesach. So let's start with some. Let's start with first our appliances within the kitchen. The first one would be the refrigerator. Now, we have to keep in mind, nobody cooks in their refrigerator. And even though you might put hot food in your refrigerator in some type of a container, you still don't cook in there. So in a refrigerator, you have to certainly take all of the food out of the refrigerator that's chametz, and you have to clean it, reasonably clean it. That is, see that there's no food in the refrigerator, no crumbs, no food left behind that would be in there. But you don't have to cover the shelving with aluminum foil. In fact, if you do, you'll have a problem. Not because of Jewish law, but because a refrigerator needs circulation. And if you cover all of the shelves with aluminum foil, you will prohibit the circulation, and your refrigerator will have a much greater chance of breaking. Yes?
What about those plastic sheets? They come like two in a package.
Well,
the width of the.
If it fits in, like you're just simply putting something on top of it, then that shouldn't be a problem. But you'll notice that there's always spaces in the back, on the sides, and sometimes even holes. And they're there on purpose, and you don't want to cover all those.
Right.
Okay? But you don't really need to. Because since nothing is really cooked in there, what you need to do is to clean it. Make sure that if something's spilled in the refrigerator, you clean the refrigerator. That's also that if spaghetti sauce spilled in the refrigerator, you clean it. Right? Because if you put something from Pesach in your refrigerator and it has any liquid on it, it touches the spaghetti sauce and it becomes liquid again, and now you're going to have a problem. So you want to make sure you clean it, but not to cover the refrigerator inside with aluminum foil. It's certainly not necessary. Right? You could, if you wanted to, after you clean it, you could put some type of an agent in there that would spoil food, like soap. For instance, if you clean anything with soap by Jewish law will ruin food. It makes it it's not any good anymore. So if you would clean your refrigerator with soap, or you clean your refrigerator with ammonia or something like that, then you certainly, any food particles that might be left behind are spoiled, and that wouldn't be food. But you certainly want to make sure you clean your refrigerator, but don't go beyond that. Don't go covering everything, as many people do. Your microwave. Microwave, there are a number of opinions that say that one cannot kosher a microwave for Pesach, but there are a number that say that you can. So I'm going to follow for our discussion that you're able to, and I'll teach you how. So the first thing is that when you're going to clean anything that's used for cooking, even though a microwave doesn't use heat in the way that we're used to, right? It doesn't use a flame. It has a different form of cooking. Nevertheless, it does produce heat. So whenever you're doing something like that, so the way that you have to first do is you have to wait 24 hours from the time you last cooked chametz inside of it, inside of your microwave. This will apply to your oven as well, but when we get to it. So by waiting 24 hours, then you would make sure that the microwave is clean. That is, there's no food in it. Nothing is spilled. Right? I'm not saying that it can't have a stain, that after you've applied, pressure and cooking and washed it and used soap and so forth, and there's still a stain on the wall. That's not a problem. But it can't be any food in there. And there you'd have to go into the corners and go into where the seams are and to make sure. After you've done that, then what one does is you take a cup of water, a glass of water, and you put it in the microwave, and you run the microwave until the water turns into steam. I don't mean totally into steam. It just starts boiling and steaming. When it steams up the inside of your microwave, at that point, you can stop, take out the cup with the water, and then take a towel or something that is not dirty, of course. It has to be either a clean one or a paper towel that's new, and you wipe out the inside of your microwave. Your microwave is now kosher for Passover. Now, the one issue that pops up is the glass plate on the bottom, because that's different than the rest of the microwave. The glass plate you would have to cover. Most people I see, they'll cover it with saran wrap. You have to be very careful in a microwave. You do not put aluminum foil in a microwave. You will blow the microwave up and maybe even hurt yourself. So people will take plastic wrap, and they'll wrap the glass with it. In order so they can use it, because you can't really use the microwave without the glass. So, but then your microwave is totally able to be used, and there's no problem with it. One thing to keep in mind with any of these appliances is that you can't do this on Pesach. This all has to be done before Pesach. So I had somebody who called me recently. They're going away on Pesach to a hotel, and they wanted to kosher the microwave on Pesach at the hotel. That way they could use it. And they can't. They have to do it before Pesach. It has to be kosher. So in their case, they're going to have to bring a microwave with them from their home, and that's what they're doing. So a microwave is quite easy. The stovetop. Stovetops, traditional stovetops, that is, that have burners on them, either gas or electric, are quite easy to deal with. The stovetop itself, itself, not where the burners are, but just the metal part of your stovetop, if you have an older one, then those areas you have to cover with aluminum foil or with something that won't melt or burn, so that if anything goes on it, right, if you take your pot and you put it down for a second, you're not putting it on a chametz surface. The burners itself, by turning on the burners before Pesach until they get to the highest possible heat that they can get, then those burners are now kosher for Pesach. The trays that are underneath the burners, especially on electric and gas stoves, you have these little cups underneath them, so to speak. It's really best to replace them. They're only about $3 each. If you can't replace them, then after you clean them, then you should cover them with aluminum foil as well. You have backsplashes also along the wall. You should clean your backsplash, which hopefully you do anyways, because you're going to have food that's splashed on it. But in general, you don't need to cover it. You can if you'd like, but you don't need to. It will be fine, yes.
I just wanted to ask, you said to heat up the burners to the highest level, and how long do you keep it on for?
It only has to be a minute or two after they've gotten to the highest heat. That would mean you put it on as high as it'll go. It'll turn red. Most likely you'll get to a point where after it turns red, it turns off, and that's as hot as it goes.
Would I?
Yeah?
The cups, you said to cover in tinfoil. After we've cleaned them, can we just replace those little metal, those basically tinfoil inserts that you can get?
Yeah, that's what I was speaking of.
That's fine? Okay.
Right.
Doesn't have to be
A lot of
tinfoil?
places they're not tinfoil, they're metal. They come with the stove. So you can replace it with the tinfoil one, or you can replace it with another one. The metal ones are only $2.50 at Canadian Tire, and you can just replace them. They're good to replace once in a while anyways, because they get very dirty. Yes?
I have a gas stove, and what I do when I clean my oven out for Passover, I put the grid inside the oven.
Okay, well that'll work. We just haven't gotten to ovens yet. Now another type of stovetop. Yes, ma'am.
I was going to ask about another type of stovetop.
Which is getting more and more common are the flat stovetops. They're made out of some type of, usually out of some type of plexiglass, because they can take heat, right? And I would say that probably the majority of new stoves are made with these flat tops, no longer with the the electric 4 burners or 6 burners, or the gas 4 or 6 burners. You usually have this type of top. Now, for a long time it was an argument if you could kosher these. For a while they said yes, a while they said no. There's differences of opinion, but basically if you will wait 24 hours after you've used it, you clean it so that it's as clean as is possible. It's not going to be like it was new. There's always going to be some staining and discolorment from the heat. But if you do that, plus you wait 24 hours after you've used it for chametz, then you can use it. What you do not do is you do not turn it on and pour hot water on it, right? Which is what people used to say. It will break. It will cause the glass to shatter, and you don't do that. It is a way of koshering, but it's not going to work in this case. Yeah, Michael?
With this oven,
Stove.
the stove top, if you put it on the self-clean and it gets really hot inside, cleans inside, and the metal becomes really sparkling hot where you can't, is that good enough to kosher? Or you still should cover with tinfoil?
You mean inside?
Outside.
Well,
outside.
the top.
You turn on the oven.
I can't imagine that the top of your stove is going to get that hot, like the inside of your oven. I mean, it would be dangerous. You really should cover it, because you're going to get so much stuff, and now that you're going to be conscious of this, you will see how often you take a pot off the burner and put it on the stovetop, just putting it down like that, and then if it was not covered, you now have an issue. Okay, yes.
The stovetop, we have a new stove, and the stovetop can be raised. You can lift it up, and the undercarriage of the stove is like a surface, and then you've got a funnel that runs from the oven as a breather. If you put foil in there, if you boil up the inside with kettle water, and then wipe it out, and then put foil down underneath, and then put the lid back down.
I don't know why you'd need to put foil in there, because you're not going to put food in there.
In case anything leaks.
Yeah, so then it leaks, it's ruined. You're not going to eat it. No. It's not going to come in contact with your pot or your food, so that you don't need to do that. Okay. Right. So basically, is there any other stovetop that I didn't mention? Yes.
Oh no, you mentioned. But how about underneath with the grates underneath the grate? Should we cover that in foil?
We're talking about it. It's preferred to replace them. They're very inexpensive.
There's nothing to replace.
No, you're talking about a gas stove where there's like the grate on top.
Yeah.
You mean so underneath that grate, which is on top, does that need to be covered with tin?
Well, underneath is usually some type of like a pocket that holds stuff, right? If stuff spills, it's
like most of it is just this flat surface of the pot.
Just a porcelain surface usually.
Okay, so then you would, if you could cover that.
Yeah. No, that's the same as his stove that lifts up. I mean, anything gets down there, you're not using.
No.
But if it's something this way, if it goes down there and it's not going to just be sitting there and get reheated with your food, so then you just would clean it out before Pesach. If I'm envisioning this correctly, right, the food is going to go in there and it's right there. Like it's right underneath it, so there you'd have to clean it out, and you should cover it. If it's what Jeremy discussed, it's a different thing.
With going back to what I was saying, is if let's say you're cooking something on top of the stove, and it happens to overflow the pot, and it goes on the surface of the stove, and it drops into and below, like it drops below the where the insert is for the stove, like the burner's here, and it's got the bottom holder which basically can connect and collect all the dirt that's come out of the pot.
Right.
But it also could fall under the stove, like under the lid.
Right.
Like I described.
Right. So that's something if you clean it before Pesach.
Yeah.
So there's nothing under there.
No.
Now, so then anything that falls under there would be Pesach, right? So in that case, it's not by the food. What you're describing is okay. What they showed me now is a range. That's like a range where you have underneath it, it's part of the stove that's built in. So there, if it's possible to cover that, you should cover that, because that's a ceramic. And that would be something that you should cover. Yes.
For the flat stove tops, what do you have to cover in between the burners? And what can you cover?
No, you shouldn't
can't,
do.
Right?
You should just do as how I described it, where you have to clean it totally. You wait 24 hours, and then you turn on all the burners as hot as they'll get. Right? When they cool off, you wipe it down again, and then it's fine.
But what about the parts in between?
The same thing, because if it doesn't get hot, then it won't get hot. Right? When you're going to use it on Pesach, you should use pot warmers there rather than putting it right on the glass. Okay, so keep that in mind. When you have a flat glass top, if you're going to put your pot down right on the glass top, which I do all the time, you should get pot warmers or pot holders that you should put on top there. So when you put something down without thinking, you're going to put it on top of that. Okay, now anything like a pot warmer that's made out of cloth, right? A lot of them are made out of like different types of cloth, just like a towel. Normally you want to use something for milk that's for milk and something meat for meat, but literally if you wash them in a washing machine, they're parv again. They start over. They're new. So if you have a problem with those things, right? If you think there might be an issue where something is on, like there's food on pot warmers, you should get ones for Pesach, and if not, you'd wash them. Because as soon as you wash a towel or cloth, it becomes parv again. Yeah.
The Shabbos splats, the new ones that they're selling that cover the entire top of your stove.
Right.
I have for Pesach a pre-cut, like a galvanized steel
Right.
cover that I put over the top of the stove.
Right.
I would have to buy a new
New one for Pesach.
New one for Pesach.
You can't use that one during Pesach.
Okay.
Correct.
And I had one that was from Pesach from a few years ago. That was glass top. That one you can't use because of spillage.
You have a blech that's made out of glass?
Yeah, it's a glass top. It plugs in. And it can also be like.
You mean it's like a?
It's like a warmer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you should really use different ones for Pesach.
So I'll get a new one.
Okay. Next, the oven. Right, so here, pretty much all ovens are going to be the same. If you have a self-cleaning oven, which hopefully you do, you do in this case again. You should always wait 24 hours and then self-clean. Now, by self-cleaning it, you're making the inside of the oven kosher as long as you've taken any food that's in it out of it. Any food that's left in it, any traces are going to be destroyed. They're not going to be food anymore. But you just like to take out whatever you can beforehand. When it comes to, some people you're not supposed to leave your racks in when you do it, according to the manufacturer's rules. And you're not supposed to take the burners from your stove and put it in it. If you would do that, and your oven would be fine, I can't say, then those objects would become usable for Pesach. So if you had, what I'll find most people will do is like with the racks, they might do that, but then they'll still cover the racks with aluminum foil. If you don't do it, then you have to make sure to cover the racks with aluminum foil, right? And you would wait 24 hours. You'd heat up the oven to the highest level, not self-clean, but as high as it'll go. Then when it cools down, those pieces within the oven that come out, like the racks, cover those with aluminum foil. Probably best double, because when you take them in and out, they tear very easily, and then they're usable.
But when you self-clean them, do you still need a foil?
No, but I can't recommend necessarily that you do that. I mean, I don't know for sure what will happen. People tell me they do it and it's fine, but I know the manufacturer's warranties all say that you have to take them out.
It's because the ease of the oven racks going in and out will be hampered. It causes something to the
expand or something?
Something to do so that if you try to take it after the self-cleaning, because I've learned the hard way, it'll go in. But it's really, they said you should not do it.
Okay. So there's why, yes?
For non-self-cleaning ovens, highest temp for how long?
You'd first wait 24 hours,
yeah.
Then you have to clean it.
24 hours, you clean it, and then highest temp for what, an hour?
That's if you are going to be putting something else in. The cleaning that you do,
yeah.
Right,
yeah.
will require you to put it on the highest temperature for a long period of time. That's how it's cleaned. Right, part of the cleaning After you put in the foam and all the stuff and you clean it, you then have to heat it up anyways. Usually the process requires that you heat it up.
Oh, with the oven cleaner?
Yeah.
I usually use more natural products than that.
Okay, so then you'd have to warm it like you said, and you should, an hour is certainly sufficient.
What I do,
Okay, to burn it up.
what I do, I put the racks in and I put the grids in the oven to clean.
Well, we're just discussing that.
I know.
I think I put the self-clean on with one of the racks.
Okay.
I never took it out.
All right.
So I don't,
Yeah, if you do it and it doesn't ruin your oven and you're fine with it, that will work halachically. Okay. Now, a toaster oven. A toaster oven and a toaster are very similar halachically. While it is literally, physically possible, it is extremely difficult to clean these things sufficiently without taking them totally apart and putting it back together. So we strongly advise that you don't do it. To tell you that you can't kosher it, it's not true. You can, but it's not worth the effort. It's an enormous amount of effort, and if you don't put the effort in it, then you haven't done it well enough, and then you didn't kosher it. So it's really a lot of work for a little object. I don't know what you'd use a toaster for anyways, but a toaster oven, you might want to use. It's just a lot of work for a small thing, and you can go and if you wanted theoretically, you could buy one for $25. But it's not worth it. The same thing applies to a barbecue. I get asked this question every year. If you can kosher your barbecue, yeah, you can, but you got to be crazy. It's just the amount of work to kosher a barbecue. It's like taking a barbecue that you've been using for a year and trying to make it look like you just bought it. Right? It's ridiculous. I know people who buy barbecues for Pesach. They love the barbecue, so they do, and that's perfectly fine. But to try to clean one is really it's just the amount of work. It makes it ridiculous to the point where most rabbis will tell you you can't do it because the average person won't do it well because it's so difficult.
Do people do a lot of barbecuing during Passover?
No, there's not a lot of days to do it. Some people do, but not a lot. Right. The next one is your hot water urn. So a hot water urn. So we were reading it in the book in our class here. They said that you shouldn't use it, but the fact is you're allowed to. You're allowed to use your hot water urn, like the same one you use on Shabbos or on a weekday. Fill it with water, like a coffee maker, but you don't make coffee with it. It's just a big thing. You fill it with water and you take hot water out. Where you have a problem is if you cleaned it. If you're a fastidious person and you clean your hot water urn on the inside, it's usually cleaned with vinegar or a derivative of vinegar, which would be chametz. So then you'd have a problem because parts of it are plastic and they can't be koshered. If you didn't, and most people do not, they just use them until the minerals inside just break it. So in that case, you just rinse it out and you're fine. Now the spigot is usually plastic, so it's preferable to cover the actual spigot with aluminum foil only because you've got hot water coming out and you're going to be touching whatever glass, cup, china that you've got to it, so it's preferable to put aluminum foil on it. If you for some reason can't or don't want to, you could pour boiling water over it and it'll do the same thing. Not over the whole thing, just over the spout part, in order to, that boiling water will...
use it for anything but water. Boiling water, no coffee.
I'm presuming that's the only thing I'm talking about, is if you use it for water.
So it's like the new ones that are all plastic, and they've got the lid comes up, and you fill.
Right, but the inside is metal.
Yeah.
It has to be.
Yeah.
So then it's like I said, it's fine as long as you didn't clean it with vinegar and that type of thing. And the plastic part that touches that actually is going to touch your utensils, you either should put boiling water on it or you should cover it, depending on the type that you have, right? If it'll work. So that's fine to use. A disposal or a garburator, right? You're not going to put food on it, but you should, before Pesach, you should run it, of course, to make sure everything's out of it. And when you kosher your sink, you have the same. You'll be, by virtue of that, you'll be making sure there's no chametz in it. If you have a sink, there are two types of sinks in general. You have sinks that are porcelain, or they're covered with something like porcelain, or today more common is stainless steel. Stainless steel is very easy to kosher if you're going to kosher it. And that's basically you take boiling water and you kosher it, and now you won't be able to do it all at once because you probably have a sink that is bigger than your hot water pot urn. So you would do it part by part, but you have to be careful that where the water runs. So you do one piece of it, for instance, and make sure you dry afterwards where it was, and then you do the next piece, because the hot water running from one section to the other, or spraying from one section to the other, can make the part that's you've just koshered unkosher again. So it's not hard to do. It's just a matter of pouring the water, drying that section, pouring the water in the next section, and so forth. Right? Or if you have the ability to do it all at once, you can do it all at once. It's just a matter of having that much hot water. Yes?
What about, you take a rock, and you put a rock in the sink, a hot rock, you put it in the oven, heat it up, you put it in the sink, and then run hot water.
But that's what you're doing is you're it's not necessary. That's a very similar thing to what you do with a pot when we get to it, with some pots. Because basically what you have to do is you have to take you have to fill the sink to the brim with boiling water.
Yeah.
Then you drop the hot rock in it. By definition, it'll increase the heat by a couple of degrees, and the water will spurt out and go all over the floor. So you can do it, but you don't need to.
You don't have, because that's a...
You don't need to. You can do it the way I described. If you have a porcelain sink, you cannot kosher it for Pesach. And in that case, I would strongly suggest that you buy Tupperware tubs. Right? Tupperware makes these tubs that for about $15 each, and you have one for milk, one for meat, for this that you keep for Pesach, and use those.
I also have a galvanized metal insert to the stove.
Okay, so that helps. Certainly, it could be helpful, but not necessary. Yeah.
Why do we wipe it down?
Because if you leave it there, right, you've now the hot water from another section will spill over, and then the water will be a conductor, and you'll cause the area that you koshered to become unkoshered again. Okay, so it's bad. If you want to do it all at once, you can do it all at once. You don't have that problem. And then it does the whole sink is now kosher for Pesach, and you can put things in it, and it's not a problem. Right? The spigot where your water comes out of, very often when we are putting water into a pot, we actually touch the pot against it, and rest it on it. So it's preferred to pour boiling water over the spigots, or to cover it with aluminum foil, one of the two.
What about changing the base where the water comes out, unscrew that and put it in one on Pesach?
I guess you could. You could like a separate faucet. Yeah, you could. Then you wouldn't have a problem. You'd have a kosher for Pesach faucet, but not necessarily is it necessary.
Okay.
Right. Now you're dealing with now your counters. So if you have stone counters, if you have marble counters, these types of counters do not absorb, and therefore you just have to clean them off and not use it for 24 hours with anything hot, and it is now kosher for Passover. If you have ones that are made out of this same material, which a lot of kitchens are when you buy them and you don't upgrade your kitchen or something, these cannot be kosher for Passover, and of course you're not supposed to put anything hot on them anyways, even though we always do, and you'll always see people with rings on them because they do, but you can't kosher them. So in those cases, you want to cover them. You have to cover it. There's all types. You can cover it any way you want. You can put aluminum foil. You can put cupboard liners, drawer liners on them. I saw a very creative thing. Someone had corrugated plastic, thin corrugated plastic, that they actually measured it to fit their counters. Then after Pesach, they're so thin and durable that you can just put them all together and just stick them in a closet.
Where do you get those supplies?
I don't know.
Ask the Ginsburgs.
You can get it at the hardware store. They're about 4 by 8 deep. And
Probably Home Depot
and,
would have it.
What I did was I bought sheets of almost it's like a plywood type of finish, but it's finished in the same concept as the stove top, or not the stove top, but the countertop.
Okay, same idea.
And I built edging around as well, so it doesn't.
Okay, yeah.
Speaking of edging, does the cover have to come around the front and be sealed on all
No,
sides?
because you're not going to put your food there.
Certainly not. So really anything that just covers the surface in which my food
That's
may
right. And then you
come
have to be conscious of what you're doing. And so then Pesach much more than you would during the year.
And does it have to be like a non-porous surface? Somebody suggested, you know, those like vinyl tablecloths from the dollar store. You know, those normal whatever.
Yeah, you
Is
could do that.
Yeah.
There's no reason why not. Your problem is you can't put anything hot in that. It'll melt.
With some nice tiles on top, it's actually very.
All right, so still you can't. It'll only accomplish part of your thing. It'll make it so it's kosher for Passover, but you can't really use it because if you use it, you're going to melt it.
Yeah, same with the corrugated plastic. Unless you're covering in a solid surface, you can't.
All right, so there's some examples.
For the
Yes.
stone counters, you just have to wash it.
And wait 24 hours.
So no boiling water.
Correct. Good. All right, so then I have your garage and other items. So garage, really the garage, just if you store food there, you just have to check it. You don't have to be concerned about food that's in your garbage can. Right? The rule is with chametz is that chametz is only chametz if it's edible at least by an animal. So if a dog wouldn't eat it, then it's not considered food anymore. Right? So that's like the lowest possible definition. So if you have like a garbage can and you throw, you know, your garbage in there and the bags might tear and food will go into the garbage can, you don't have to be concerned about that on Pesach. It's not going to affect you. You do have to get rid of your garbage before Pesach because you'll have literal chametz in the garbage from before Pesach. So before Pesach begins, you have to somehow get rid of your garbage. Here we're privileged enough that the government does go at the Gardner-Williams and they have bins there that they put there for us to use before Pesach, and you're allowed free of charge to bring your garbage there, even if it's not garbage day. I mean, this year, garbage day is Thursday, Pesach starts Friday night, so you only have a day, but the idea would be that they always allow us to do that, and you should. But as far as garbage cans, you don't have to be concerned about them. Your green bin, you have to make sure that you clean and that you use a bag with it, because there you have actually food in there. So there you wipe it out and use a bag inside. Okay. Any other things for the kitchen, or basically in the house?
Knives. You know,
What?
a knife.
That's when I get the utensils.
Like kitchen chairs, you just wash them down and.
Right. That's right, exactly. And especially if there's children around, you're going to have dirty chairs. But if not, it'd be real simple. Yes?
A wooden table, my wood dining room table. What do I have to do with that? Just cover it with a
Tablecloth.
fine, and it doesn't have to be like a Pesach vinyl cover underneath. It could just be a.
Yeah. I mean, you're not going to put a pot on that.
No.
Right. So
We're
it's
not eating directly off it. There's a tablecloth.
Right.
Okay.
The tablecloth is sufficient.
Should you replace the heating? I know you have a pad that protects the tabletop.
No need. There's no need. The pad is there to protect your table. Right. There's no need, because you're not eating on that ever. Right. So that's not an issue. When we get to the utensils, there's a lot more that we need to deal with that pertains to the kitchen, but we're not at that point yet. Let's look at some of the more areas of what I call non-food, and then I call animal food, which is actually a mistake, but it's because it can't be non-food and food at the same time. But animal food, people don't realize that if you have a pet, you're not allowed to give the pet food that's chametz on Pesach, because you're gaining from it, and a dog will eat it. And by definition, if a dog will eat it, then it's considered to be chametz. If a dog won't eat it, you wouldn't be giving it to him. So it brings all kinds of issues. There is such a thing as kosher for Passover animal foods. For a long time, the Hartz Company, that originally the Hartz Company were Orthodox Jews, the ones who invented all the stuff for birds, right? And it was all fine, they used for Pesach, and now it's, of course, like everything else, been bought by some conglomerate. But my brother is a veterinarian, and he told me that the veterinarians will often sell dog food that is actually all meat, right? It might not be kosher, so you don't eat it, but it wouldn't be chametz. But you can actually find in the store that they have animal food that is kosher for Passover. It doesn't mean it's kosher, and it doesn't mean you should eat it. It means that it doesn't have chametz, right? And that would apply. Now, if your animal is healthy and you can give it human food for a week, then give it human food for a week. It won't kill it. It won't kill a dog. It won't kill a cat. It might make it. It might not make it that you want to have them around all the time, but it won't. Right? I got that from my brother, the vet. But in general, there is stuff for them. But you have to be careful with animal food. And you can't just simply give your neighbor your dog and have the animal do it, because you're still benefiting from the chametz, right? Because it's coming from your neighbor. Okay, and we're going to go through some examples of stuff. I have a whole list that I'll read some things from. Toiletries. All right, I hear from everyone they always want to buy new toiletries for Pesach. So again, most toiletries have alcohol. A lot of them have alcohol, but it's rubbing alcohol. It's not the same alcohol you have in liquor, and therefore it's something that is really inedible. So according to the letter of the law, unless you're putting something in your mouth, you really can use it on Pesach. You don't always have to buy new things like new shampoos and new soaps. Now, if you have a soap or a shampoo that specifically has chametz in it, right, and there are some that use those for whatever reason, shampoo with beer or different types of grains inside of soap, that you couldn't use. But other than that, regular ones are all fine because it's not edible. It's not something that you eat. There are some people who say that when it comes to perfumes and aftershaves, things like that, that you could distill one from another and therefore it would be edible by an animal. Most people don't accept it. So for the most part, you're able to use all of those things on Pesach. You don't always have to buy new ones. What you do have to do is you have to make sure that you have toothpaste, mouthwash, toothbrush are all special for Pesach. Now, toothpaste and mouthwash, there are many brands, and this is an area we'll get into more next week, of things that you don't have to buy specifically for Pesach, but you'd have to buy new, right? In other words, most brands of regular toothpaste are kosher for Passover. All regular coffee, I don't mean instant coffee, regular coffee is kosher for Pesach.
You know what I did? You know what I did today? I went to No Frills. I bought coffee. I didn't buy it in the kosher for Passover aisle. I went into another aisle and it said KP.
Right, very good. But all of the regular coffee, whole bean and ground, if it's regular coffee, is kosher for Passover. It wasn't always. There was preservatives that were a problem, but now they're not. Yes?
Does that mean my French press is fine? Or because it's a vessel, does it need to be kosher?
Yeah, you've never washed it all year?
Actually, I kind of just rinse it with water. I use it every day.
If you think you're careful enough that it didn't come into contact with anything with chametz, otherwise,
recollection, I've not washed.
I have one for Pesach because they're $25. I have one of those. Yes, Jeremy?
What about the Keurig machines? Can they be used?
I would think not, because we don't know what they all of the things are in those coffee containers that they have.
You say that they're pure coffee.
Well,
that's the question about
and if we'll put it this way, if it's 100% pure regular coffee, you've never come near it with chametz, and you've been careful the entire year, then you're fine. If you no different than if you tell me that you never have chametz in your house all year, you don't have to kosher your house.
Okay, like the only thing that we have, I think Shia likes to have hot chocolate occasionally. But it's got a hechsher.
Yeah, but it does not for Pesach.
Right.
Or flavored coffees of any sort are not kosher for Pesach.
So
regular coffee is the only thing that is.
Decaffeinated.
Even decaffeinated is an issue because it's decaffeinated with chemicals. That's how they decaffeinate them, and therefore the decaffeinated coffees need to say kosher for Passover.
Yeah, mine.
Great.
So would you use a drip coffee maker instead?
Yeah. Drip or a French press, as she was mentioning. Okay. So we did dental care. I spoke before about cars. Medication. It's very important. You know that that medication. I'm talking about prescription drugs. Are not food. They are medication. Try chewing one, and you'll believe me. Right? If you haven't, try it. Just once, and then don't come back and complain to me. They are not edible. Now, certainly, if you can get them that are not chametz or kitnius, then you should. But if you can't, like if you go to the pharmacy and you say, my doctor has prescribed this medication, there are 2 or 3 types of it, are any of them definitely kosher for Passover. Most of them can tell you. They have a book that describes what's in them. The real problem is the filler, not the drug itself. Because in most times when you buy a pill, the pill has a drop of medicine and everything else is filler. And it's usually cornstarch or something like that, which we don't use on Pesach. But because it's medication and you are not using it as food and you need it, the doctor prescribes it for you, you need it, you're allowed to use it, even if it's kitnios and even if it's not certified kosher for Passover. It's preferred to get things that are, if you can. But you should never stay away from taking prescribed medication on Passover for that reason, because you can kill yourself. You can get very sick. You don't want to do that. Okay? So now that's not the same as over-the-counter medication, aspirins, Advils, all of those. I have a list of which ones are kosher for Passover by default, and you can use those. But over-the-counter, including vitamins and health aids and stuff from health food stores, are not going to be prescribed by a regular physician, and therefore you'd have to have those kosher for Passover. Most stuff that comes from natural food stores need to be certified. Yes.
If you have free vitamin, like you're taking some supplements like niacin, or you're taking vitamin, a multi-grain vitamin that's made by Frida, the company.
Well, it'll say right on it if it's kosher for Passover or not.
But if you're taking it, if you were prescribed to take it, not by choice, but because already you were told you have to.
If your doctor told you have to take this drug, and it happens to be a vitamin, but he tells you have to take it like you have to take an antibiotic, right? Then you have to take it, right? But in general, over-the-counter medications that we have would all have to be certified kosher for Passover, because it's not going to.
11 pills.
I understand, but I'm talking about other ones. So, and I'll give you some examples when we go through this. But just since we're here, I'll give you some ideas of some medications. I've got a list here. You can get a similar list where I have. The COR published a book, which you either got in the mail this week, or I'll have them in our synagogues the next few days. In there, they have 3 pages of items that you would question if they have to be certified for Passover or not, and they tell you. So let's just take a look at an example of some medications that they have. Let's say lactate. Lactate is very common, right? People have a problem that they need to take lactate. Lactate tablets, drops, and tablets might have chametz in them, but lactate milk, if it's needed, if you buy it before Passover, it's perfectly fine. Why would you buy it before Passover? It's an interesting thing. The same thing with milk, regular milk. You should always buy milk that's kosher for Passover. What would be wrong with milk? Like, why wouldn't it be kosher for Passover? The answer is vitamin D. Vitamin D is chametz. And they enrich our milk with vitamins, including vitamin D. So when you buy kosher for Passover milk, even if it says it has vitamin D in it, it does not have vitamin D in it. And lactate also often has that in there. So because there's so little of the vitamin in it, if you buy it before Passover, it becomes nullified. If you buy it on Passover, it does not become nullified. So you have to buy, if you here, you don't have to buy milk. That's not kosher Passover. You can go to any store and get it. It's easy. But lactate, you won't find that way. So that you would buy beforehand. But that's not the pills or the tablets. Those here, they have to be. Those could very well have chametz in them. Did you have a question?
Yeah. How does that pertain to? Is that the same for Halav Yisrael milk?
Halav Yisrael milk here is going to be kosher for Passover.
Yeah.
It's going to say right on it.
I went and looked today, and I didn't.
But maybe it's too early. Milk doesn't last that long.
So what about the milk in my freezer?
Well, if it doesn't say kosher Passover, you shouldn't use it.
Can I keep it in my freezer?
Yeah, because it's not. It would be buttal. It would be fine.
Okay.
I'm just see if I can come up with There's a couple other examples of some medication. All right, vitamins, of course, I mentioned. Vaseline is not an issue. Let's see, but baby powders, right? Doesn't need baby ointments. Baby oil doesn't need. Baking soda doesn't need. Band-Aids don't need. You say, why would you think? I don't know. Somebody asks, I guess. I don't mean to waste our time, but there's a whole list of medications and things like that that don't need. Like I said, with contact lens solution doesn't need to be certified. Coffee whiteners do. Coffee filters don't. Folgers instant and Taster's Choice instant coffees do not need to be certified for Passover. As long as they're kosher, they're fine. All flavored coffee does have to be. All regular beans, whole and ground coffee does not have to be certified for Passover. So those are some examples. Okay, you have a whole list on all the different books, and you can get most of these books on your smartphone if you have one. So prescriptions and vitamins. Okay, let's just spend the next few minutes dealing with koshering your utensils, since you may have to do that before we meet next week. So you've got different types of utensils. Different utensils that you have, you're going to fall into two different categories. One is that you have what is it made out of. Certain things that can be kosher, certain things can't be. Then you also have what is their usage. And the usage of how they're used can affect how you kosher it. Because the rule of kosher is as follows. The way that the particles, this is just like chemistry, the way that the particles got into the object is the way they're going to come out of the object. So if you have metal and you heat up metal, it expands, right? If it expands in water and then it contracts, it's going to take within it some particles of the water inside of that metal when it contracts, right? When it gets cold. Where if you're using it with food and you're cooking, then particles of the food will enter into the metal, and when you heat it up again, it'll come out. Right? That's physics. Right? That's simple law of how it works. So therefore, if you're cooking a metal pot and you're cooking oatmeal in it, and it gets hot, the metal expands, it absorbs some of the oatmeal into it, it cools down, and it's now inside of the metal. The next time you use that pot, a very small amount is going to come out when you heat it up again and be replaced by what you're cooking with it now. So if you're going from Pesach to Chametz to Pesach, you're going to contaminate everything. So the way you kosher a metal pot is the same way that the food gets in it, which is you heat it up with water. You take a pot, fill it with hot water, right? Boil the water. Now the heat, it's expanded. It's gone into the water, right? Take it, pour out the water, the pot cools down, and now it's kosher. Right? That's how metal works. Right? So that's how your silverware will be kosher for Passover. Now, there's no question it is preferred to purchase for Passover. I'm not going to tell you how to use your money. It's, if you don't have the money, I'm not going to tell you you have to. It's preferred to not kosher a lot of things. When I was a kid, everybody koshered everything. I remember we spent a week koshering stuff in my house. I don't know, my mother, the stuff she came up with the kosher for Passover, I don't think we ever used. I don't think we ever used it ever. But she would kosher it. Today, it's not as common. So, because people buy it. But if you want to do it, or if you have a meat Passover pot and you want to make it into a milk Passover pot, you're going to kosher it. So the way you do it with a pot like a soup pot is you fill it with water, you bring that water to a boil, right? When it's gotten to a full boil, right, a rapid boil, and it's totally filled right to the brim, like to the point where you're afraid it's going to pour over. When it's boiling now, it's going to overflow a little. Then you just cool it down and pour the water out, and you've koshered the pot. Right? In other words, the pot itself. Right. What you have to let me explain a little better. What you're doing is that when you have the pot and you heat it up, if the pot itself is not kosher, so then you have to make sure that the water goes on the outside and the inside. So that's where we heard about this rock. Right? Where you take a hot rock and you drop it into the boiling water, it increases the heat a little bit, and the water pours over the outside of the pot. Now that's in order to kosher a pot by itself. You have only one pot and it's not kosher. But what if you have a kosher for Passover pot? And you should definitely do this. Get one big pot for Passover and always keep it for Passover. A big one, the biggest one you can get. And then all you have to do to kosher other metal objects is to fill that big pot with water, and then you take the metal objects and drop them into the pot when the water is boiling. And now everything you've dropped into that pot becomes kosher. So let's say you have a big soup pot and it's it's kosher Passover. You fill it with water, and the water boils. And now you've got all this silverware. You take the silverware one at a time and drop them in. You don't take them out one at a time, just drop them in one at a time so that they're totally encompassed by the boiling water, at least for a second. Then everything you've dropped into that pot becomes kosher. You've got every piece of metal that you've dropped in there. So all your silverware, which is metal, you put it in and it becomes kosher for Passover. Right? So those are the most efficient. No, there's nothing to do with the mikvah. There's a separate area. So that's how you deal with it. You just drop it in and it's done. That's
your Shabbos candlesticks, if they're silver, other than just polishing up and you need to fashion them?
No, not unless you use them for food. Right. Yeah.
I just wanted to let you know there is community cashiering at Bayit this coming Thursday night from 6 to 9.
Right. The Bayit has is actually the COR, the kosher organization. They go over at the Bayit, and everybody who wants, you want to kosher anything with metal, bring it there. And they have a pot like 6 feet tall. They drop it in, and it becomes kosher, and you're done. And you don't have to do all the stuff I just told you if it's metal. Yes.
How about soda stream?
Yeah.
Soda stream, do you have to replace a tank?
If you're careful with if you're careful, because it's only CO2 in the tank.
Besides getting new bottles, you have to do that.
If you're careful with it, and it's not something that you would get hot chametz on, then you could use it.
You have to replace the bottles.
Yeah, that because you're going to be cleaning the bottles in your sink, right?
You just clean the machine.
The machine, you would clean it, but unless you do something like put vinegar in there or something, it's not a problem. Right. Yes?
And does it have to be unused for 24 hours before you can kosher it?
Yeah, you should wait 24 hours before any of the stuff that we just described. Right, but going to at the Bayit, it's a very good way of doing it. You can just take a pot, right, fill it with all your silverware, and take the whole thing over, and they'll kosher the whole thing for you in a minute, and it's done. And when I lived in Israel, they used to have these 10-foot pots, and they'd have fire, literally fires underneath them, and they would you go by it, and things would melt. They would be so hot, but they would kosher things there. So that's what they do, and the COR does that for anyone. Now, how about other things? Your biggest problem is going to be with an object that has a handle that's not metal. So if you have a knife with a wooden handle, the problem is you can't kosher the wooden handle, and therefore you won't be able to kosher the knife because it's part of it. If you have knives with metal handles, that's fine. You can kosher those.
Plastic?
What?
It's plastic handle.
The same thing as wood. You can't kosher plastic. So the same would about anything that's metal. You can. Anything that's metal that's attached to something else, you can't. Plastic we can't kosher at all. Glass can be koshered. Customarily we don't usually do it, but you can, and you kosher it by basically what most people do practically is they take their bathtub, they fill it with water, you put the glasses into the bathtub with the water. Every day you empty and replace the water for 3 days, and then you can use them. In my life I've never seen anyone do this, but you can, right? Most people will use throwaway glasses or buy glasses, right? Again, I'm not going to tell you if you can't afford to buy glasses, right? And you don't want to use throwaway stuff, then that's what you could do. But in general, I've never seen anyone do it, but I know that you can. Plastics, wood, other type of objects that I haven't mentioned, you can't kosher for Passover. So Tupperware bowls, all that type of stuff. China also presents a problem. In general, you cannot kosher china. If you have a set of dishes for Pesach, you keep it for Pesach, because if you have your regular dishes, you really shouldn't kosher them. There are certain leniencies in certain instances. If you have something that's very dear to you, very expensive, family heirloom, then come speak to me about it privately. We have a way to deal with it. But in general, if you go to Sears and you buy a setting of dishes for 8, and you want to now kosher those for Passover, you really can't do it. So you have to use something other than china if you want to use it in that way. If you want to buy china, then you buy it just for Passover. That's why you'll find lots of people have their grandmother's china.